The book goes into kind of describing some of the cultural differences because we have My Plate, okay? But there are some other meal planning, some other dietary reference guides that comes to it. The book gets into a few of them here. Really, the one that I want you to know is the Southern European diet. We know it as the Mediterranean diet. Okay? That is the Southern European diet. They probably couldn't use the Mediterranean diet because somebody probably owns it. So that's why they call it the Southern European diet, but it's basically the same damn thing. With the Mediterranean diet, it's based with a lot of grains, fruits, vegetables, potatoes predominantly, okay? But a lot of grains, a lot of fruits. There's a lot of oil as well. The meat protein is usually more white in nature. It's a lot of seafood, a lot of poultry. Red meat is very rarely eaten over there. If it does, it is, certain special occasions and whatnot. So it's not something that's, consumed a whole lot of. So again, not a lot of red meat. When it comes to the Mediterranean diet, when it comes to a diet plan in general, oh, you can't forget wine. I mean, good God, hello, come on, anybody can do that. But when it comes to diets, the only diet that's been shown in studies across the board to be beneficial is the Mediterranean diet. Okay? Keto diet, intermittent fasting diet, blank diet here. Mediterranean diet is the only one to show in studies consistently it's superior in terms of nutritional profile and better health outcomes. Okay? And there you go. I mean, who wouldn't love to eat that? I would love to eat that right now.
Earlier you said that variety was also like a big factor of things. How far exactly does that kind of variety go? Obviously, eating the same meals every single day, not like changing out that at all is never really that great. However, like for instance, if the kind of meat that you always eat is just fish, but at the same time, like you have like carrots and like kale and spinach and broccoli and like some other like whole grain wheats and stuff like mixed in there. How helpful is all of that truly? I mean, I'm just trying to, I don't know, balance out my diet the best way that I can. But there are certain things that it's harder to get your hands on.
Sure. When it comes to a lot of that stuff, it is about trying to find it, trying to get access to it, being able to afford it anymore, because it's a lot of that stuff is super pricey. But I mean, I'll give you an example for me, because I mean, I'm the only anecdotal information that I can give you. So for me, I mean, I vary my protein. In the morning, I have a grain, and I have egg whites and an egg. My next meal, I'll have fish in some kind of form. Sometimes it's tilapia. Sometimes it's ahi steak, ahi tuna. Sometimes it's salmon, and there's different types of salmon. Sometimes it's Hawkeye salmon. Sometimes it's regular cold fish salmon. Then I'll have chicken. I'll have a turkey meat, ground turkey. So there's me varying it out throughout the various different meals for my day. For vegetables, I'll sometimes put some spinach in the morning with my eggs. Later in the day, I'll have a green bean. Again, I have spinach again later in the day generally. Asparagus, Brussels sprouts. So it varies week by week. I just get whatever's on sale when it comes to vegetables or what looks better. So that's how I vary it. I don't eat green beans literally with every single meal. That's where we want to start varying. That's what I'm looking at with the variation here. With fruit, I don't necessarily vary my fruit. Sometimes I'll have an apple. Sometimes I will do strawberries in that regard. And that's pretty much all I do with vegetables. Sometimes I'll do oranges when they look good. Right now, there's been a lot of those cuties. that have been out that have been really, really good. But with fruits, I limit it a little bit just because I wait for the season a little bit more. I do a lot of fats, but my fats are usually, in the form of avocado, or the fish, obviously. And again, I kind of limit the serving size for those because they are considerably fatty. Fat brings a lot of calories to it. So that's how you can vary it up. You vary it up with each individual meal. Um, Within one meal, again, I have all my parts. Then I'll have a carb. Sweet potatoes is generally kind of what I do most of the times. When it comes to carbs, or couscous, brown rice. So that's, for me, that's what I kind of do. So for me, I break it up into proteins, fats, and carbs. And then when I look at that meal plate, do I have, and for me, I don't eat a lot of dairy. So there's never really a whole hell of a lot of dairy on my plate. I do get my dairy in the morning with my almond milk. But then again, I have foods that have calcium richness to them. So I don't necessarily worry about, making sure I have calcium or dairy with every single meal, because I'm choosing a lot of fresh fresh vegetables that can be high in calcium and vitamin C and the stuff that you find within milk. So from terms of that, when we start getting into the macros and the micros, when we start looking at examples of foods and whatnot, if you find yourself only eating one type, maybe switch it up a little bit. And instead, one week you'll eat this, 1 week you'll eat that, and just create the variation that way. It's something that takes a lot of time to do. Figuring out what foods are high in what vitamins and minerals, what foods are low in them, and trying to figure out where your holes are in your diet. It just takes time. Okay, just takes time. Trust me, it takes a lot of time. Here are some other eating plans. I'm not going to ask them on the exam. Here's the Latin American diet. You can kind of see theirs. Here's the Asian diet as well. You can kind of see theirs and compare it to ours. Theirs is a lot more, theirs is a lot more bountiful, when it comes to a lot of fruits and vegetables, as you can see, very small amounts when it comes to meat. The great thing about this, sake, wine or beer in moderation, fantastic. Cervezas, beer and wine, awesome. And it's got water in there. We can't forget that. So fantastic. I just find it interesting that they put alcohol in theirs and we don't. I just find it fascinating. But I think the book gets into the African American diet. It's the African diet. It's very different. It's a lot more heavier foods, a lot more not as optimally healthy foods. A lot of ethnic dishes a lot of ethnic cooking is going to be a lot more poor and nutritional factors. You do see a lot of that in Latin American and African American communities. And those are going to be groups of individuals that generally have a lot more higher obesity. And we'll look at some of that later in the semester, in the 4th unit. Religion plays a big part in it as well. I'm not going to ask you about any of these religions, okay? But you can see that, there are a vast number of religions, and these are just some of them. And all of the kind of dietary practices that they subscribe to all the time or some of the times. Okay, but you can kind of see religion can play a huge part in it. There's a video that we'll try to watch later in the semester here, and it looks at the Seventh-day Adventist. They tend to have some of the more strict when it comes to it. As you can kind of see, they're lacto-ovo vegetarians. And so they don't eat really a lot of meat at all when it comes to that. And they tend to have a lot more longer life. They have a lot more positive health outcomes. They do a lot of research with this group of individuals, just because they do live a very long time, don't have a lot of negative health outcomes in their old age as well. So it's kind of interesting.